Today we discover a story where a quiet life is shattered by an extraordinary secret. Samuel Washington, a humble hospital worker, loses his beloved wife Lorraine, only to find she's left behind not just memories, but a hidden fortune meant to change the world. Shock turns to courage as Samuel faces elite families, social prejudice, and the pressures surrounding his son's high-stakes wedding. In a breathtaking moment, dignity triumphs over wealth, reshaping relationships and forging an unforgettable legacy. Lorraine's fortune becomes a force for good, sparking a foundation that lifts children and unites communities. Grief gives way to hope as ordinary routines transform into lifelong impact, and one small family's love ripples through an entire city. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? Have you ever wondered how a single moment, a split-second decision, can redirect the entire course of a life? While most people walk past destiny without noticing, Veronica's moment arrived when she least expected it. The world saw her as invisible, a young woman drifting through Lagos's crowded streets, clutching her threadbare shawl, the city's cacophony masking her hunger. Every step was heavy, her dreams dulled by desperation. No one paused to ask her name. No one imagined she had a story worth telling. But fate always listens when kindness whispers. It all started on a day that seemed much like any other, a day that for most would blend into the monotony of survival. Veronica was cold, her stomach rumbling, only a few coins in her pocket. Yet she gave the last of what she had to help a stranger, unconscious and bleeding beside a dusty roadside. She did not know his name, nor did she wait for gratitude. Even when hospital staff hesitated, looking at her worn clothes with suspicion, she stood firm. "Let me help. Please, let me try," she insisted. Her courage, drawn from a well deep inside, broke through the indifference that so often guards the privileged from the plight of the destitute. No one could know that the stranger, Chief Madhu, was a billionaire, a mover behind the city's greatest projects, hidden beneath blood and shadows. As he drifted between life and death, Veronica offered her own blood for the transfusion, her own meager earnings for medicine, a sacrifice so pure it seemed almost foolish. When he finally opened his eyes, she was asleep in a plastic chair, unaware that everything was about to shift. Chief Madhu made her a promise, his voice low but unwavering. "You will never suffer again. I will see justice done for what was done to you." Those words were a key, opening a door to a world Veronica had never imagined. But she was not rescued just by a man of wealth. She was lifted by the very kindness she had once sown, now blooming when she needed it most. Part 2 of Veronica's remarkable journey doesn't begin with a fairy tale trumpet or a lucky break. It starts with disbelief, the kind that lingers in the bones of those who have known only struggle. If you're new to her story, pause here and discover the beginning. Only then can you truly grasp the magnitude of the transformation awaiting her. And if you feel a tremor of hope as you listen, it's because hope itself runs through these moments, refusing to let go. The morning after her rescue, Lagos seemed softer, a city painted gold by the rising sun, its chaos momentarily tamed by possibility. Veronica found herself seated in the back of a black Range Rover, her hands trembling on velvet upholstery. She wore a gown the color of dawn, carefully chosen by Isaac, Chief Madu's trusted assistant. Her hair, recently washed, was drawn back with care, a hint of coconut oil giving her skin a healthy sheen that had vanished during life on the streets. But behind the delicate transformation, her eyes held a silent storm, disbelief, suspicion, and shards of old fear. Chief Madu sat next to her, his own scars just healing, a reminder that pain could touch anyone, no matter how high their status. "Are you all right?" he asked, his words gentle but his gaze unblinking as the car swept over the third mainland bridge, sirens clearing their path and pedestrians gaping. Veronica nodded with a forced smile. "I keep thinking I'll wake up on the pavement again," she confessed, her voice barely audible. The world outside, market vendors, watchful mothers, curious children, all seemed to pause for this unlikely procession. As they slipped into the affluent enclave of Ikoyi, everything changed. The atmosphere crackled, bright with possibility, but also heavy with expectation. The mansions, peering down from behind their fortified walls, bore witness to a new chapter being written. A chapter for someone who had started life with nothing. The moment the Range Rover glided through the gated estate, Veronica's breath caught. She was used to the brutal honesty of the streets, the choking exhaust, the scent of sweat and fear. So this world of manicured lawns and glinting marble felt unreal. Painted boulevards, impossibly ornate gates, guarded by stone-faced security men, ornamental trees standing in silent vigil. It was as if she'd stumbled into the fever dream of luxury she once glimpsed on television screens through shop windows. When the car finally rolled to a stop, she could hardly move. Before her towered an estate grand enough for royalty, complete with a fountain whose waters sparkled in the sunlight. The letter M gleaming in gold above the front gate. "Is this a hotel?" she whispered, struggling to believe this majesty could have anything to do with her. "No," Chief Madu answered softly. "This is your home now." He helped her out of the car, every gesture deliberate, as if urging her to trust the miracle unfolding before her. The staff assembled in perfectly choreographed silence, women in starched uniforms, a tall butler in a black suit. "Welcome, Madam Veronica," he intoned with a bow. Veronica flinched, looking around as if to locate the real recipient of the greeting. But there was no mistake. Her own name echoed back at her, an unfamiliar sound dressed in respect. He led her through glass doors into a space that seemed sculpted from dreams. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Marble floors reflected the light in perfect silence. Paintings spoke of culture and calm, their colors blending into the cream and gold of the walls. A gentle scent of roses suffused the air, carried by the hum of perfectly regulated air conditioning. For Veronica, it was an overwhelming flood a world that did not even exist in memory, much less reality. Overwhelmed, Veronica allowed the maid to guide her upstairs. Each step up the broad marble staircase echoed, resonant with the memories of all the nights she'd spent scrabbling for rest beneath bridges, drifting in and out of sleep to the groan of distant trucks and the threat of morning police raids. Now, her room was not just safe. It was larger than every home she had ever known, fitted with a bed whose sheets shone like liquid silver. The wardrobe was already full, stocked with clothes she didn't dare touch, while the vanity table boasted an array of creams, perfumes, and oils far beyond what she might even have known existed. Yet it was the gleaming white bathroom, its shining fixtures, its limitless hot water, the bathtub built for dreams, that undid her. She gasped, covering her mouth in disbelief. When Chief Madhu appeared at the threshold, his face unreadable. She whispered, tears in her gaze, "I don't deserve this." He answered not with platitudes, but with conviction, "You never have to deserve mercy. God finds those the world overlooks, and I see you just the same." The weight of her past, the endless begging, the humiliating scorn of Madame Patricia, the nights spent hidden from danger, rushed over her in that moment. Her legs buckled, and she fell to her knees in gratitude, a gesture that stunned everyone watching. But Chief Madhu lifted her gently. "You knelt for life, not for me. Stand tall, Veronica. You are the miracle now." He left her alone to gather herself, giving her space to believe this might truly be her new reality. Alone at last, Veronica studied her own reflection. She did not recognize the woman on the other side of the glass, a survivor, unbroken, her scars hidden beneath new light. As she curled into the impossibly soft embrace of her new bed, whispering her gratitude into the silence, she wondered, could this peace, this respect, really last? As dawn broke over Ikoyi, the rest of the city carried on, ignorant of the watershed moment taking place in Chief Madhu's mansion. While Veronica rested, her dreams flickering between hope and uncertainty, important work began downstairs. In a private study, shrouded in glass and lined with old books, Chief Madhu prepared for battle, his tailored navy caftan pressed to perfection. Folders, files, and sleepless purpose littered his desk as Isaac, his faithful assistant, began to walk him through the darkness they intended to expose. "Madame Patricia Nawati," Isaac reported grimly, "is filth wrapped in diamonds. What she calls a modeling agency is nothing more than a mask, a gateway to a transnational network trafficking young girls, tricking them with promises of salon jobs or restaurant work in Italy, Dubai, even Ghana, and forcing them into escort work instead." Chief Madhu's jaw clenched with anger. For years, Madame Patricia had operated with impunity, hiding behind a careful absence of fingerprints on any crime, using vulnerable girls to recruit others, and bribing lower-level police to ignore her growing empire. "We go higher," Chief Madhu said, dialing for the commissioner himself. "Quiet, trustworthy." I'm about to give you a predator who's been selling our daughters like cattle. By afternoon, a skilled task force assembled, officers trained in the art of the sting, capable of blending into shadows and extracting the undeniable. Among them, Inspector B.C. Aluko stood out, her eyes sharp, her instincts honed by years of hunting the worst humanity had to offer. She missed nothing. She came in person to hear Veronica's truth. When introduced, B.C. regarded Veronica not with pity, but with a soldier's respect. "That woman needs to be stopped," she declared. Together, alongside a hand-picked undercover officer prepped to infiltrate Madame Patricia's den, they set out to build a case not just for revenge, but for all the girls whose stories never made it to freedom. There's a kind of courage that blossoms only when past pain is no longer a threat, but a weapon. As Inspector B.C. Alico began her interviews with Veronica, every word was measured, every scar noted with a silent precision that bordered on reverence. Veronica's memories, raw and unfiltered, tumbled forth under soft questioning. She told of the promises Madame Patricia made, shiny, seductive offers of overseas work, the lure of glamorous modeling contracts, tales spun like gold before being warped into chains. She spoke of girls transported in hidden vans, their passports seized, forced into darkness in strange apartments, far from the gaze of the city. In these confessions, Veronica uncovered more than her own ordeal. She became the voice for those who never returned, whose names were only whispers among the frightened. For each memory, Inspector Aluko pressed further, tracking connections, compiling timelines, and mapping the twisted web of exploitation. Lessons bloom. Isaac, watching quietly, found his nights haunted by these testimonies. The cold, calculated machinery behind the trafficking network was coming into focus. The routes from villages to city, coded messages passed in market crowds, playlists of numbers and false names, now etched into evidence files. Chief Madhu, meanwhile, wielded influence like a scalpel, working with senior officers to secure court orders and protect witnesses. He was adamant that real justice could only come from uprooting Madame Patricia's empire, not from hush money or backroom deals. In the mansion's library, under frosted light, he whispered to Veronica, "Your truth isn't just yours anymore. It can set so many free." That night, as crows gathered on the eaves in the gray dawn, the first real hope began to swell. A gathering storm promising to wash Lagos clean. As the investigation gained momentum, the mansion transformed into a sanctuary for the rescued. Veronica wasn't alone anymore. 3 other girls, former victims, were smuggled to safety and given refuge. They arrived hollow-eyed, clutching borrowed bags, shades of Veronica's own arrival. The staff welcomed them in the same ritual fashion. A hot meal, showers, clean sheets, and a respectful silence, broken only by the gentle hum of new beginnings. Here, their pain was no longer currency. It became a map to the empire they would help dismantle. Isaac coordinated with NGOs specialized in survivor support. each visit bringing hope and much-needed expertise. Psychologists arrived to run therapy circles beneath the shade of the courtyard fig tree, where laughter slowly began to replace sobs. Legal volunteers coached the girls on what to expect in court, teaching how to recognize threats and stand their ground. In these moments, what had started as a solitary rescue swelled into a tapestry, each story weaving strength into the next. Veronica, once crippled by trauma, emerged as a natural leader. She comforted newcomers, reminding them with gentle patience that they deserved dignity and justice. When one of them, a girl named Esther, collapsed in tears, Veronica held her close, whispering, "You survived. That's enough for now. We'll get through the rest together." For the first time, she saw her own reflection not through eyes of loss, but of possibility, and realized the seed of hope she planted had not only taken root, but was blossoming for others. Tension built like electricity in the days leading up to the operation. Police vans passed inconspicuously on neighboring streets. Officers taking positions, dressed as delivery drivers and mothers with toddlers. Chief Madhu, meticulously calm, monitored every detail from New State's secure communication room, a web of monitors showing live feeds from the sting's many angles. At the heart of the operation stood Inspector Aluko, clad in plain clothes, her badge hidden but her authority unmistakable. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity and reach. An undercover officer, Blessing, a woman with nerves of steel, would pose as a desperate job seeker, playing the part of a naive village girl, lured by Madame Patricia's promises. Equipping Blessing with hidden cameras was an act of silent rebellion against all the lies ever whispered in back rooms or sealed-off apartments. For days, Blessing rehearsed with Veronica and the rescued girls, memorizing their stories, learning the slang, the mannerisms, every nuance. They turned trauma into tactical advantage. At the hour of reckoning, the undercover team converged on the notorious agency, a nondescript two-story building in Surrey. Blessing rang, thick with feigned anxiety. Madame Patricia herself answered, golden jewelry gleaming, the practiced smile of a seasoned manipulator never faltering. Downstairs, police monitored every word, every grim joke and false reassurance. When Madame Patricia outlined the opportunities awaiting in Dubai, her voice as smooth as oil, Blessing nodded, secretly transmitting the evidence that would break the ring. The trap wasn't just for Madame Patricia, it was for every shadowed figure who thought themselves invisible. The moment the signal was given, chaos erupted into order. Teams of officers surged into the building from every angle, armed with warrants and righteous fury. Screams and shouts echoed through the halls, feet pounded down staircases, and through the turmoil, Madame Patricia was led out in silver handcuffs, her empire crumbling with every news camera that flashed. Her lieutenants ran, but there was nowhere to hide. Records, cash, uniforms, drugs, stacks of fraudulent documents were seized by disciplined hands. In the aftermath, rows of terrified girls were discovered behind locked doors, some clutching each other in fright, others staring numbly at freedom they had ceased to imagine. Back at the mansion, the news exploded across the evening broadcasts. Veronica, surrounded by her newfound sisters, watched from the plush living room, barely able to contain her tears as she saw Madame Patricia marched into a police van. For years, their stories had been disbelieved or buried. Tonight, the world could no longer look away. Isaac uncorked a bottle of champagne, Chief Madu's treat, and poured glasses for everyone, toasting to courage, hope, and the end of an era ruled by fear. Yet, as the moon rose, Inspector Aluko reminded them that real justice is more than a single raid. It's a promise, renewed every day: protection for survivors, prosecution for offenders, and grit to rebuild. Veronica nodded, her gaze steady, softly declaring, "We've only just begun." The following days brought transformation deeper than Veronica thought possible. Lagos woke to headlines celebrating the rescue of more than 30 girls and the fall of one of its most notorious traffickers. Journalists camped outside the High Court, their cameras trained as Madame Patricia's lawyers spun inventiveness to the press. But the avalanche of evidence was overwhelming. Public prosecutors, emboldened by the publicity and Chief Madu's constant advocacy, pressed for the harshest possible charges: human trafficking, assault, and conspiracy. Inside the sanctuary of the mansion, life blossomed. Breakfast became lively debates over future dreams and newfound ambitions. One girl revealed her passion for painting, splashing colors inspired by the wild garden outside. Another, who once feared her own voice, read poems aloud to the others. Laughter, the rarest currency of survival, became the soundtrack to every meal. Veronica embraced the role of mentor and advocate. She worked with Isaac and the NGOs to ensure every girl had identification, access to education or training, and secure housing. Together, they drafted letters to foreign embassies, tracked down family members, and pressed for legal reforms. For the first time, the phrase, "You are safe now," was not just a promise, but a lived experience. Veronica knew scars would remain, but as the sun streamed through her new bedroom window, she believed, finally and fully, that healing was not only possible, but inevitable. The world outside the walls of the mansion was changing, too. The story of Veronica and the girls found its way into newspapers, radio shows, and neighborhood gossip, sparking unrest and a wave of solidarity throughout Lagos and beyond. There were candlelight vigils in front of the courthouse, with activists and survivors sharing their stories. Hashtags began trending on social media, drawing attention to the plight of the trafficked and the failures of a system that had allowed it to flourish unchecked for so long. Some reactions were supportive, but others were tinged with skepticism or outright hostility. 2 days after the rescue operation, a group of women knocked on the mansion gates, mothers, aunts, and sisters, desperate for news about their missing loved ones. Chief Madu opened the gates and allowed them into the courtyard. where Veronica and the other rescued girls, initially fearful, soon discovered they were not alone in their suffering. For many, it was the first time they had been treated as survivors and not as runaways or shameful secrets. In those meetings, the power of collective healing became evident. There were embraces filled with tears, apologies for not believing, promises to fight together for justice, and seeds of new advocacy organizations began to form. Veronica, always humble, found her voice growing stronger each day. She spoke at impromptu rallies and quietly held hands with grieving mothers, drawing strength from solidarity that only survivors can truly understand. Each new meeting was a defiant declaration. We will not be silent anymore. The legal proceedings against Madame Patricia and her accomplices began under the bright glare of public scrutiny. Courtrooms that once echoed only with the voices of lawyers and clerks now buzzed with journalists, advocates, and representatives from international organizations. The survivors, prepared by patient counselors and legal teams, entered the witness box not as faceless victims, but as determined individuals ready to recount what they had endured. Veronica's testimony was particularly powerful. She told her story calmly, tears shining in her eyes, but her voice steady. The defense tried to cast doubt, insinuating ulterior motives or inferring that the girls had come willingly. But Veronica stood her ground. Her cross-examination became the touchstone for the entire case. She looked Madame Patricia in the eye and spoke of the night she had been promised a job and instead found herself betrayed, imprisoned, and brutalized. The psychological scars were plain to see, but so was the resilience that now defined every rescued girl. Testimonies from others echoed like a chorus through the courtroom, similar stories of lies, cruelty, and the theft of childhood. The prosecution built its case with chilling precision, backing personal accounts with physical evidence, bank statements, and the footage captured by Blessing, the undercover officer. When the verdict was finally read, guilty on all charges, the crowd erupted in relief. But inside, for Veronica, the real victory was never about punishment. It was about reclaiming stolen voices and proving that justice, however delayed, could still be served. For the survivors, justice was necessary but insufficient. Lessons bloom. They realized that the journey ahead was not merely about moving past trauma, but about rebuilding lives and identities that could never again be defined by victimhood. Supported by Isaac's tireless coordination and Chief Madhu's resources, the girls were enrolled in a wide array of programs, from basic education and vocational training to entrepreneurship courses and creative workshops. Veronica gravitated toward a youth leadership program, eager to learn how to channel her experience into helping others. There were, of course, setbacks and hard days. Nightmares lingered, and not all the girls' families were able or willing to welcome them back. Some faced stigma in their home communities. Others struggled with anxiety and depression that no courtroom victory could magically erase. But the environment built in the mansion and reinforced daily by counselors and peer mentors was one of accountability and unconditional support. Veronica spearheaded a peer support initiative. Drawing from her own healing, she led weekly encouragement circles, offering both practical advice and a listening ear. Each girl brought unique hopes. One dreamed of starting a catering business, another of becoming a social worker. With each success, no matter how small, they celebrated together. The phrase, "We rise by lifting others," became their rallying cry, a simple truth that stitched fractured lives into an emerging community. As time passed, the movement Veronica had helped inspire crossed social and economic boundaries. Policymakers, stirred by the publicity and community demand for long overdue changes, invited the survivors to testify before Parliament. Veronica, Isaac, and 2 others traveled to Abuja. It was her first time on an airplane, a moment equal parts exhilarating and terrifying. Seated by the window, Veronica gazed at the clouds, her palm pressed to the glass, and found herself filled with gratitude and anticipation. She was not only surviving, she was finally living. Her testimony forced real discussions about reforming laws, increasing penalties for traffickers, improving police training, and establishing better shelters for at-risk youth. No longer were survivors a hidden statistic. They were now collaborators, experts in their own right, drafting proposals and helping shape survivor-centered frameworks. Journalists chronicled their journey, shining a spotlight on the faces of change. Back in Lagos, Chief Madu continued his quiet support, funding scholarships and hiring 2 of the survivors to work in his charitable foundation. Lessons bloom. Isaac assisted in expanding partnerships with women's groups across West Africa, organizing conferences to spread awareness, prevent trafficking, and create cross-border safe havens for the vulnerable. The network, born from pain, had matured into an engine of transformation, one that reached far beyond the original walls of rescue. Healing is neither linear nor simple. It is a mosaic, crafted slowly from shattered pieces. Veronica's own journey remained shaped by both joy and sorrow. There were mornings when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, when old phantoms of hopelessness resurfaced, reminding her of how far she had come, and how easy it could be to slip back. But each time she faltered, support was never far away. A kind word from Isaac, a message from Esther, a breakfast shared in the sun with fellow survivors. One afternoon, Veronica visited the hospital where her journey had shifted so dramatically. She brought gifts for the staff, chocolates, thank you cards, and a donation box funded entirely by the survivors' new businesses. The nurses greeted her with admiration, remembering the frightened but stubborn girl who had refused to let a stranger die. In a quiet moment near the blood donation clinic, she met a new intake of volunteer donors, sharing her story and encouraging others to give as she once had. That evening, as she walked home through familiar neighborhoods, she noticed the way people now smiled at her in the market. Children greeted her, calling Auntie Veronica. Neighbors who once looked away now waved, their respect clear. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that her scars were not shameful. They were badges of survival, of compassion, of unbreakable will. She had found redemption, and in doing so, had become a symbol of hope for countless others who still waited for a chance to be seen. The momentum Veronica and her sisters created did not stop at their own healing, nor within Lagos alone. Stories traveled like wind, carried by news reports, community dramas, and church sermons. Veronica found herself invited into schools to speak to teenage girls about dreams, choices, and the warning signs of traffickers. Each visit ignited new ripples. The principal expanded school counseling. Local pastors organized safety workshops. Elders in remote villages found the courage to challenge silence out of respect for the brave Lagos women. International human rights groups reached out not just to collect stories, but to sponsor new safe houses and to consult on survivor-led policy. Veronica, still humble and at times overwhelmed by attention, learned to navigate interviews, public speaking, even roundtable broadcasts on national radio. But she always returned to the truth. We were saved because someone cared. Now it's our turn to care for others. Chief Madhu established the Veronica Foundation, a long-term project designed to cover medical care, legal aid, and vocational scholarships for girls at risk. Isaac, whose loyalty had become unwavering, managed operations with methodical precision, seeking out untapped resources and training staff to respond efficiently to crisis calls. The girls, now young women, began to see themselves as leaders, advocates, and agents of their fate. Faith and friendship proved to be Veronica's strongest anchors. Her relationship with Esther deepened, sharing secrets, healing, even learning to laugh at old fears over cups of tea. Esther, once silent and withdrawn, revealed a strong will and a clever sense of humor that helped ease dark memories. They started writing their stories together, planning workshops and mentoring younger girls newly rescued from similar networks. The mansion evolved into a true haven, not just for those escaping the traffickers, but for those seeking advice, refuge, or simply a place to belong. Weddings were celebrated. Babies were born, and every milestone became a reminder that life after trauma could be rich and joyful. On weekends, the girls volunteered in nearby clinics, painted community murals, and planted gardens in orphanages and slums. "This is how we reclaim our future," Veronica told a new arrival, "by giving what was denied us." Isaac, always observing quietly, shared with Veronica his own struggles and ambitions. He confided that before meeting her, he had felt powerless against corruption and cruelty. Her courage had ignited something new in him. Veronica smiled, knowing that true change rarely comes from heroes alone, but from ordinary people choosing again and again to stand together. Years had passed since Veronica's rescue, but each anniversary brought new moments of reflection and gratitude. On the 3rd, Chief Madhu organized a grand celebration in the mansion's courtyard. Survivors and their families, police officers who had worked the case, journalists, charity partners, and friends gathered beneath strings of lanterns. There were speeches about justice and hope, songs composed by the girls, and feasting until dawn. During the evening, Veronica was surprised by the arrival of two women, her aunts from her father's village. They had long searched for her, mourning her presumed death, blaming themselves for letting poverty push her away. Their reunion was emotional, a mix of tears, laughter, and whispered prayers around an altar of thanksgiving. Old wounds were aired and then bound by forgiveness. Veronica, who had feared she would never again belong to her roots, felt her family woven back into her new life. The reunion extended beyond blood. Madame Patricia, from prison, wrote a letter begging forgiveness, not a cheap plea for release, but genuine remorse, acknowledging the horror she had inflicted and the cost. Veronica read it carefully, then sent back a message of mercy. What you did cannot be undone. But I hope you find the strength to choose kindness, if life ever gives you another chance. In her heart, she understood that forgiveness does not erase the past, but it can free the future. Veronica soon found herself called to even greater challenges. Her reputation as an effective survivor advocate led to an invitation to join a Pan-African task force against trafficking. She traveled to Ghana and Kenya, listening to stories that echoed her own. The complexity of the problem was clear. Economic misery, failed institutions, greedy middlemen. But so was the possibility embedded in every survivor's voice. In Accra, Veronica helped build survivor coalitions. In Nairobi, she drafted practical guides for safe migration. She reminded every group that dignity must be woven into every policy, and that trust is earned through listening, not preaching. Her impact spread. Policy reform in one city, recruitment of safe transportation in another. The movement she'd started was now international, carried by compassion and resilience. Back at home, the Veronica Foundation hosted exchange programs. Girls traded stories and skills, learning Swahili songs, braiding new styles into hair, making joint plans to prevent exploitation in their own countries. Story had begun as one girl's rescue, but now belonged to thousands. Shared ownership, collective healing, communal victories. In the quiet hours before dawn, years after that fateful day, Veronica often woke with a sense of peace she'd never known. Her life was no longer defined by trauma, but by the strength to grow, lead, and love. The mansion was still her home, but she spent much of her time traveling, mentoring, and building systems that would outlast her own lifetime. Chief Madu, aged but not diminished, became not just her benefactor, but a beloved father figure. Isaac, now married to one of the survivors, ran the foundation with unmatched commitment. Their children played in the gardens, laughter echoing against marble and memory. Esther opened her own counseling center, using art therapy to bring healing to those still lost. Veronica's story was published, inspiring a new generation to stand against injustice. Statues in public parks honored survivor leaders, and scholarship funds bore her name. But her greatest joy remained simple: sitting beneath the fig tree, hands laced with those who had endured, eyes full of gratitude. She had become proof that destiny, shaped by compassion and courage, could rewrite the story of an entire community.